welcome in to ClearPath Retirement Radio. This is our inaugural season 2 here, uh, and we are very, very excited, Mitch. And if you're listening to this and you've recently lost a spouse through death or divorce, first of all, we're sorry. Today's episode isn't going to make that easier, but our goal is to make sure the financial side doesn't make a hard year even harder. Okay. So, I can tell you personally that this is near and dear to my heart because my mother lost my stepfather in her early 50s to cancer. And, rather than facing retirement as a couple, feeling very prepared, all of a sudden she was, a single woman facing retirement, alone. And that is a scary, scary thought. And I can tell you that, once you get over the emotional impact of that shock of now all of a sudden you're facing things, either through divorce or through a death, alone as opposed to with a partner, you know, the the financial piece of that is it's there's a lot of things that happen there, and it's going to impact you dramatically financially. And we're going to talk through some things today that potentially could help you to kind of think through these things, because I was shocked by this statistic, Mitch. 8 out of 10 women will end up managing their household finances alone at some point in retirement. Whether that's through widowhood, divorce, or simply outliving their spouse, and almost none of them are prepared for that.
That one blew my mind as well. Obviously it's a statistic that you'd expect to be, around that range, but seeing 8 out of 10, and that's a lot, man. And it seems like when it does happen, it's always more sudden than they were prepared for. Even if they had done some planning and had kind of talked through, hey, here's how things are going to look, like it still tends to be more sudden than you could have thought. And then you're stuck with that emotional, that physical, that financial, all that burden, and it's challenging.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, people just don't think about the fact that all of a sudden your tax bracket changes
Right.
dramatically. All of a sudden, the need to take money from pre-tax accounts, goes up because now you're getting, less Social Security. You're getting, you're in a higher tax bracket typically, and you need to pull more income from pre-tax accounts, which is even going to drive your taxes even higher.
Right.
And so, those are things that need to be thought through. And we often see women come in, or couples come in to us, and this happens so often where, one of them is doing all of the financial stuff and the other one is really just not interested, doesn't really get involved in that piece whatsoever. And the person who's handling all the financial matters will say to us, like, guys, I mean, I'm just so worried.
Right.
What happens if all of a sudden, I'm gone? What is he or she going to do? They have never paid attention to this. They don't know where the bank accounts are. They don't know where the investment accounts are. They don't understand how to pay the bills. I mean, I am really, really concerned. And, these are the type of things that people think about.
It
These
is.
are the things that keep them up at night.
It is. I mean, we'll hear people say, honestly, like I don't know if I would have came in here if it wasn't for my other spouse, right? Like if it wasn't for their peace of mind and their be able to say, hey, here's another resource we can have, just in case something happens to me, like you can come talk to these guys, right? Like that's so powerful and it's such an important part of what we do. Because it's like the one spouse will be like, I understand this stuff, but they don't. And like I need if I suddenly leave, like I need someone to be able to step in and help them. So,
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
And I can tell you that one of the biggest, you know, um, benefits you can get from working with a really good advisor who understands intimately your situation is that that person can be the resource that steps in at that point
Yeah.
and teaches the other spouse, well, here is where your assets are, here is how you do this, and here, kind of take them by the hand, because I can tell you that first year to 18 months, it's almost like things become a blur.
Yeah.
And they don't, when I've had, when my mother thinks back to that time in her life, it was such a shock losing my stepfather. She will tell me, like, I don't even remember those conversations.
Yeah.
Like, I don't remember things happening. And things I remember very clearly, but she has no recollection of because she was in shock. And that brings me to one of the big major rules that I think makes perfect sense is if you do lose a spouse, either pre-retirement or in retirement, the number one rule should be you don't make any major financial decision for at least a year.
Right.
And that is just a very, very good rule of thumb to have in those type of instances, because I have now in my 2.5 decades have worked with countless widows and widowers, and I can tell you that we have stuck to that rule and to not make any major changes in that first year and maybe even 18 months
Yeah.
before we really, really start to discuss changing the plan and getting things, consolidated and changing things around, because that person is just not going to be in the right place to be making those decisions. And that's often when people make the biggest mistake.
It is. And that's when we see, when it's not a client we've already had, when we be a recently widowed or, divorced situation, and it's the first couple months, that's when they're the most stressed. When they come in and they're like, hey, I'm trying to change all this stuff. Like, I talked to this person. They said I need to do this. I talked to my friend and she said I need to do that. They hear all this conflicting information that might not align with where they're at. And it usually never does, right? They're, like you said, almost grayed out. You don't even really know what's happening. And to try to take all this information from all these different places, you're reading this online. Here's the things you should do. It's stressful. And that's when people come in and they're like, I just can't do this. Like, I don't know what to do. I'm trying to do everything and nothing all at the same time. And it's hard.
Yeah.
Hard.
Yeah. I mean, women typically outlive their husbands by 6 to 8 years.
Yeah.
So statistically speaking, the chances of that burden falling on you at some point is extremely high.
It is.
This is something to take seriously, because again, you've got to understand just the basic things. And I can tell you, the first thing that I would do is, if I was the spouse that was in charge of paying all the bills, I was in charge of keeping track of the investments, I was in charge of, all the financial matters, and the other person really had no knowledge of that stuff, I would really be putting, building out a, a sheet for them. I would start to really document like things for that person in a way that, is easy, simple to understand, where, keep it to 1 or 2 pages where like, hey, here's where the money is, here's the banks we use, here's the account numbers, here's, and especially for those accounts that are just, not joint accounts,
Right.
because, those, listen, there's already enough things to do when you lose a spouse. To having to navigate the financial landscape of all of these things and try to figure out, okay, what goes through probate, what can I access immediately, it's a nightmare if you haven't planned and really, really, having an idea and an action, steps to take in this sort of environment. And I can just tell you that everything you document and every time you put into, you frame it like, hey, if something were to happen to me, here's the first things you're going to do. And if that involves like giving them my business card and saying, just call this guy, he's going to make sure everything gets taken care of.
Right.
We don't mind being that resource, and
No.
that does give our clients peace of mind to know that we're going to step in at that point and really give that person good advice, good guidance, and make sure that financially they're able to navigate it. Because again, the emotional side of things is enough, and the financial stuff is just, when you have to navigate it all and you don't really have any kind of roadmap or plan, that can break people, and that can really send them into a spiral that's hard to get out of. And we don't want to see that. We want to see you, you know, be able to navigate that in a way that's dignified